record this, right? So anyway, if you're watching this recorded or live, I was telling everybody that I have a way to check on Zoom that who has been attending the sessions. I just run a very quick report, and well, this is going to allow me to see who is going to get the 10% credit for attendance and participation. So anyway, I thought it was worth mentioning this. So, all right, we are going to start our session with me sharing my screen like this. Okay. So today we're going to start with what seems to be a brand new topic, and well, it is, but I am going to connect in this section the theory or the theoretical background. We have been talking about the dependency theory with, well, the historical moment of Latin America early in the 1900s, and also the policy making that took place, all the policies that were implemented, hence the name import substitution and structuralism at the time, as a consequence of the, well, economic history at the time, and of course the theoretical work of very influential people working during those years. So if you remember, picking up on where I left in the historical recount of Latin America, the 1800s were a mess. After independence, most countries were in total disarray. Different countries were in different directions, and but it was, for the most part, a wasted century in terms of technology, in terms of development, because very few people, after 300 years of being conquered by the Spanish and the Portuguese, had a good idea of how to run a country. So if you remember as well, at the time, the dominant ideas in economics were about free trade. Adam Smith opening up the economy to international trade, commerce, international finance, and that was the rule of the day, right? Remember, countries were in Latin America were concentrating production and exports of particularly hot commodities, depending on the nature of the geography. Some of them were producing oil, some of them were rubber, coffee, bananas, pineapples, and so forth, right? Now, everything was relatively okay, not just in Latin America, at least for a few people, the ones that concentrated the land and the power. So everything was more or less stable until a major disruption took place. And I'm talking about the 1920s that began in the US and then spread out throughout the world. I'm talking about the stock crash of 1929. I'm talking about the Great Depression, right? And I'm sure all of you have heard about this in history, in sociology, in political science, philosophy, or this is just cultural knowledge, basic knowledge. The 1930s, the Great Depression. So this is important, guys, because as the world economy starts getting into troubles and collapsing, Latin America is trapped in a really, really difficult position because suddenly, let me admit this person, because suddenly Latin America is unable to sell all these raw materials to the rest of the world because the rest of the world is in troubles. England is in troubles. All Europe is in troubles. The US, Canada, all of them, all of these economies are collapsing. So they are not demanding rubber. They don't need steel. They don't need food. Well, if they do, that's fine. They don't have the money to pay for it, right? So the Great Depression is a worldwide disruption. And that produces a significant contraction in the, well, world economy and the Latin American economy, particularly because they were based on exports, right? So here I have a note, according to some calculations, which for us today, this is like laughable. Okay, Latin American exports declined from about $5,000 million before the Great Depression to around 1,500 millions after. $1 million. Like, oh, come on. Now we're talking about the $1.9 trillion package, right, to rescue the US economy. So these numbers, yes, they pale in comparison to the numbers that we speak about today. But keep in mind, this is 100 years ago, very different circumstances, the US economy compared to the Latin American economies. I mean, there are a lot of things to consider. All right. But as a consequence of this, Latin America engaged in what we in economics call a serious problem in the balance of payments. And this is a great opportunity for me to introduce an extremely important concept, not just for this class, but for any other class in econ, in political economy that you will ever take, okay? So I really want to explain what this balance of payments is about. So let me stop sharing this, right? So the balance of payments, and by the way, there is a handout in Canvas for you to get more details about this. And I have explained this in other classes, but this is so important, guys, that if you understand this concept, you're going to understand a lot of things that are happening in the world economy today and will happen in the future, right? So the BOP, balance of payments, is like the accounting system for any country in an international setting. So let me, I'm gonna share my whiteboard so I can draw some pictures for you, okay? So imagine the balance of payments. Imagine the balance of payments. What is going on? I want to draw, there we go. Imagine the balance of payments as this bucket. Let me erase the most recent one. Sorry. Bear with me, guys. I'll try this, do this well this time. All right. Here is, imagine this is a bucket. And in this bucket, this is some liquid that we are going to call foreign exchange. Foreign exchange. Bear with me. This is going to be very important, okay? So in this bucket of foreign exchange, we are going to have inflows. That's in other words, things going into the bucket, and we are going to have some leakages. So some things going out of the bucket, okay? Now, let me give you an example. Every country in the history, every country in the world today, like Mexico, Bolivia, China, the US, whatever, has a balance of payments. And the balance of payments is reset every year. So we have the balance of payments for 2019, the balance of payments for 2020, and so forth, okay? So let me give you an example. Imagine that this is the balance of payments for, I don't know, Argentina, right? So every time Argentina is exporting, remember, X means exports. And remember, Argentina is a great producer and exporter of meat. So imagine that Argentina is exporting, I don't know, 10 metric tons of beef to the US. So because Argentina is selling meat to the US is paying a given amount of dollars that are going into the bucket as exports, right? So the Argentinian economy is making money in the form of dollars because they are selling meat to the US. Now, if at the same time Argentina is importing, I lost my pencil. If Argentina is importing, and remember this is M for imports, let's say Argentina is buying cars from Japan, right? Toyota or whatever. This is going to be a leakage of, let's say, Argentina is paying Japan with Japanese yens. Now, at the same time that you see some money going into the bucket because of exports, you have some money going out of the bucket because of imports. Are you following so far? Right? So the level of this liquid that we call foreign exchange can fluctuate over time. If you are exporting a lot more than what you are importing, the level of this bucket is going to go up. If you are importing a lot more, the level of the bucket is going to go down. Right? Now, exports and imports are just one example of the very many reasons that you can have the flow or the liquid going. I'm using this word liquid, but foreign exchange to go up or down. Now, what is in this foreign exchange? Okay, and this is where things are going to get hopefully interesting as well. So remember that a couple of classes ago we spoke about hard currencies. Let's see, I lost my whiteboard. I don't know what happened. Let me bring it back. So we spoke about the hard currencies. So in this bucket, once again, are you looking at my whiteboard? Okay. So remember, in the bucket we have US dollars, Japanese yens, British pounds, euros. We also have gold. We also have silver, and many other things. Anything that can be used as a means of payment for international transactions goes into the foreign exchange, right? So it's very important for any country engaged in the global economy to have a healthy level of reserves of foreign exchange. Because if you are running low on reserves and you need to buy food or medicine from another country, what are you going to do? If you are Argentina and you need medicine for your population, you need vaccines for COVID, you need infrastructure, whatever, and you need to buy this in international markets, we are not going to take Argentinian pesos as payment. We are going to take gold, silver, dollars, Japanese yens, anything but Argentinian pesos or any other currency that is not part of the foreign exchange, and that is not a hard currency, right? Are you following here? So it's very important for any country to have a healthy level of foreign exchange reserves. Now, exports and imports are one example. Let me give you another one. So here, another inflow could be loans. You know, the Argentinian economy could be borrowing money from the World Bank, right? Or another flow could be transfers. You know, let's suppose there is a disaster in Argentina and the Red Cross and Greenpeace are making donations in dollars to, help the population. All of these things are going to produce that the level of reserves goes up. But obviously, let me change my color to green. You may have other outflows. You know, if Argentina is making payments because of debt, servicing debt, well, the level is going down. If Argentina is investing in other countries, you know, buying buildings or whatever, the level is going down, right? So I don't know if you're following this properly. Let me stop sharing this. But here is the situation. So the world economy crashed in 1929. Latin America is unable to sell raw materials and primary goods to the rest of the world. The level of international reserves of every Latin American economy is going down, 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 down. Well, that's what we call a crisis in the balance of payments, because suddenly Latin American economies don't have the resources, foreign exchange, to buy whatever they need. Food, medicine, equipment, capital. And that is a problem. That is a problem. And this is how, well, in that particular case, the Great Depression spread out to Latin America, right? So anyway, let me make a pause here. So to make sure that you understand this concept of balance of payments is very important, guys. And we are going to be using this again in the future. Because remember, the concept is simple. but the implications of what happens are not so easy to grasp, right? So, okay, questions, comments? Make sure I go to the next.
I'd like to ask, you mentioned last week with this, or maybe the week before, soft versus hard currencies, and that they are fiat now, they're not exactly backed. But with this exchange bucket, they kind of do need to be backed by good faith or a positive potential future. So even though they're not backed by gold, they still need to have it, their money's value is related to other real things, even though it's not technically gold anymore.
Yes, you're right on the money, Chad. You're absolutely right. So remember, what makes a hard currency hard is the confidence of the world economy in the policy making of the particular government that issues that currency. So for example, this is why we trust, this is why the US dollar is a hard currency, because the world economy is trusting that the federal US government knows what it's doing in terms of, managing its economy, is politically stable, has a strong record, is a large economy. The same with Europe, for the euro, the same with Japan. But very few people in the world believes the same things for Bolivia or Mexico. This is why the Mexican peso or the Bolivian peso are not considered hard currencies, right? So everything that goes into the bucket of the balance of payments has to be a hard currency, or better yet, gold and silver, right? Because you don't have to trust any government. As long as you have bullion, gold, silver, and other precious metals in your reserves, you can sell them in international markets, or actually some countries receive receive gold as payments. As long as you have enough of that, you're going to be fine in international markets. The problem is when you're running low, or you get to zero. Because when you are running low or you have nothing, guess what? You have to start either borrowing money or looking for partners. This is similar to when you are a single person, so an individual. The only two ways for you to expand your income are by borrowing money, debt, or by looking for partners. You associate with somebody or whatever, right? Let me listen to Jacob. His hand is up. Go ahead, Jacob.
I just had a quick question. So you said that the Latin American countries still use gold for some of their purchases. What kind of purchases are they using?
No. Remember,
not the consumers, but the government.
Yes.
What kind of transfer payments would they be? Just massive payments in gold?
It could be. You don't see this very frequently, but again, let's suppose that a given Latin American economy like Guatemala, they didn't have any hard currency, but they have, $10 million in gold, and they have a debt of $10 million or the equivalent in whatever currency. Well, they could actually pay that debt with that equivalent in dollars, in gold that they have in their vault. Yeah, that happens all the time. Yeah. Now, obviously, we are very, I don't know how many of you remember, you're too young to remember, but there is this very famous movie, Goldfinger by 007, James Bond, where they talk about Fort Knox. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but Fort Knox is a place in the US where we keep a huge amount of gold. So anyway, the bad guy is trying to rob Fort Knox, and this is why they call him Goldfinger, right? But anyway, the point is that to minimize risk of robbery or losing gold, now most of these financial transactions are electronic. So you don't see the physical movement of bullion, like in the movies where, you have these robbers, carrying all these bars of gold. We don't see that anymore. But technically they belong to different countries regardless of their physical location, right? So yes, Jacob, these payments take place today in the 21st century. We just don't see gold moving, by metric tons flying or by train anymore, because it doesn't matter where they are. As long as it's a stable country, you are fine with keeping it there, right?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let me continue here. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to ask if a country would implement the more of the ISI strategy, the import substitution industrialization, would that fill up the bucket way quicker?
Aha. Well, think about this. Sandeep, you're skipping ahead a little bit, but think about what import substitution is doing. The idea of ISI, import substitution industrialization, is to close your economy, to industrialize. But by doing so, you need a process of acquiring capital in order to industrialize. You need to buy technology, you need to buy equipment. And typically for Latin American economies, this equipment, this technology is not native. They have to import those things from other countries. So rather than filling up the bucket initially, because you need to import all these things, you are going to empty the bucket, right? Okay. I don't know if you're following the argument, Sandy. Are you?
You're gonna start off by emptying the bucket, and then as you get all the equipment, after then it'll start filling up a little bit.
Yes. Well, the original plan, and I am going to explain all of this week. The original plan was just like you said. We are going to. So the idea of import industrialization is this. Let's suppose that Mexico or any Latin American country is, I'm making this up. This is a marker. Right now, Mexico is importing this marker from Europe. Well, the logic of ISI is this. Well, rather than paying Europeans for this, we are going to produce it ourselves here in Mexico. Oh, okay. What do we need? Well, we need the know-how, the technology, and the equipment. Well, let's acquire it. All right, let's buy it. So the plan was to buy all this equipment, all this technology, to substitute this import with a locally produced, a Mexican-produced version of the marker, and bicycles, and cars, and everything, right? The plan was that eventually, once that all this new technology and all these new industries were developed, Mexico and Latin America were going to switch from import substitution to export promotion, because now we could compete with international markets. And by selling these Mexican-produced markers and Mexican-produced bicycles and everything, then we can start refilling back up the bucket. That was the original plan. But as we will see, it was not that easy. It failed. And we are going to see the consequences of that strategy or those strategies to today, to the consequence that produced today, debt and a massive social cost. And this is where I'm going with all this material this week. So hang on, Sandeep, but you're in the right track.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right. Any other comment or question? Good questions, guys. This is awesome. This is great. Any other? All right. So let me go back quickly to my PowerPoint here. So I guess now we can move to the next points after. This is where I stop. So Latin America, faced with this huge challenge of a crisis in the balance of payments, they had to do something. So they said, we cannot buy stuff out there. We just simply don't have the means to do it. So they start implementing three main policies: tariffs, quotas, and restrictions to foreign exchange. Like, what is that? All right, so let me stop this once again. It's easier for me if I see you guys. So a tariff. most of you probably know what a tariff is, but some of you don't. So a tariff is essentially a tax on imports. So for example, something that you can relate to. If an American buyer is looking for a Japanese car, a Toyota, they can buy it here because we already imported the car. But there is going to be a tax, which we call a tariff, in order to protect the US car industry. Because if we don't, probably the Toyota car is going to be a lot cheaper and more American consumers are going to prefer the Japanese cars or the French or the German cars, the BMW, right? So the idea of the tariff is to raise the price for domestic consumers so that they don't have a strong preference for international cars, but more or less in competition with US cars. Well, in Latin America, they start placing imports to a lot of things so that people in Latin America, rather than buying internationally, they buy domestic. That's the basic concept of a tariff. A quota, same idea, but rather than imposing a tariff, they would impose limits. So if they were importing, Latin America was importing, say, I don't know, chocolate or cheese from Switzerland, they would say no more than 100 metric tons per year. Once we reach that limit, nobody else can buy more cheese or more chocolate, right? That's a quota, it's a maximum. And then the restrictions in the foreign exchange. Well, since the government controls the bucket, so the balance of payments is fully in control of the federal government, you know, the federal government can give access to companies or private individuals access to these private reserves, this foreign exchange. So, for example, if you are a citizen of Uruguay and you are the owner of a company and you want to buy equipment in Germany, the only way for you to acquire euros is by going to the bank to buy euros. But if the government is telling the bank, hey, if this guy from this guy is coming to you to trying to buy euros, don't sell them to them. Why? Because under law, I'm telling you don't. Yeah? It's the law. So if that's the case, this Uruguay entrepreneur cannot buy euros and therefore cannot buy this machine from Germany, I think I said, or whatever in Europe, right? So these three basic policies were implemented to minimize the impact on the outflow in the bucket. You reduce imports with tariffs and quotas, and also you reduce imports by restricting the use of foreign exchange, right? The idea, the basic idea, well, you know, let me see if I can, you know, once more, the basic idea of these policies was very simply, let me go with my, I knew this was gonna happen. Forget it, but anyway, the basic idea is to stop the leakages. I was going to put an X or something on the leakages in the bucket, right? Anyway, so let's continue here. These new times after the Great Depression, what my slides characterize as the new political economy, was based on this. Well, that's okay. You know, people, Latin America thinking, most rich economies today, I'm talking about 100 years ago in the 1920s, became rich after they were protected for a long time. So they have tariffs, they have quotas, and they have foreign exchange restrictions. Japan, the US, they did exactly the same thing in the 1800s, right? So let's do the same thing. Maybe this is going to work. The other idea that they discovered is that Latin Americans knew that in order to compete with international markets, they had to develop a mature industrial structure. You know, to compete in the big leagues, so to speak, require that a strong industry base a strong and capable entrepreneurial class in Latin America, that they had the know-how, that they understood, you know, marketing challenge, marketing channels. They spoke English, you know, all of these things, right? So they said, that's okay, that's okay. This is what Sandeep eventually became in the 1950s, the import substitution industrialization policies, or ISI. Right here, ISI, right? Now, the institutional framework at the time was hosted by CEPAL, or in English, ECLA, the Economic Commission for Latin America. I'm talking about a UN sponsor office that was pretty much in charge of analyzing the economic and political situation of Latin America and produce policy, right? Recommend policy to every country in the region, right? This ECLA, or this organization, CEPAL, was heavily influenced by dependency theory. Because remember what dependency theory was telling us, especially the radical guys? Oh, what we need to do is completely detach from interacting with the world economy. Because these guys, the rich countries of the world, are taking over. They control the rules of the game. They are exploiting us. They are taking advantage of us. And this is why we cannot develop. So, you know, when Latin America reached the 1930s with this Great Depression, and they saw the need to look inward to get protection on this bubble, they said, oh, well, now dependency theory stuff makes sense. Makes complete sense, right? It's about the especially among the, it's about the remaining structures based on agriculture and mining. We are like totally backwards. You know, this is like, we are like, you know, 100 years late coming into this game of international trade, coming into this, you know, big leagues. We just cannot compete with these guys. We need to close down, industrialize, develop the industries, and then we can start talking about going out after international markets. Mm-hmm. One of the most famous economists at the time, an Argentinian economist by the name of Raúl Prebisch, who, by the way, he is the one that actually, this is one of those coincidences in economics. Raúl Prebisch and another German economist produced this, the name of the German economist was Singer, the Prebisch-Singer hypothesis, which has to do with what we talked about before, the decline in terms of trade that you can see on your screen. I already explained this last week. But anyway, the point is that Raúl Prebisch became the president of CEPAL. And these were his main ideas. Well, in addition to what everybody in dependency theory has said, according to Raúl Prebisch, Latin America was in troubles because technology was mainly controlled by the powerful countries in the center. And they had no desire, no intention to share this technology with the rest of the world. Which makes sense, right? You want to create a patent, you want to protect your, you know, intellectual right, intellectual property, because if you don't, well, somebody's going to steal it without making any research, making any investment, and start making money competing against you. So, I mean, that's totally understandable. Actually, this is the whole notion behind the, you know, things like the US patent system, right? Anyway, he also says that another problem that Latin America was facing was that productivity gains that, of course, are the result of new technologies, rather than being matched by raising wages. You know, if you remember your labor economics classes, higher productivity should be matched with higher wages. But in the case of this relationship between Latin America and the rest of the world, it didn't work that way. You know, for Latin America, it was raising wages in rich economies, but not falling prices. So Latin America have to pay more and more and more and more, despite the technological improvements of the time. So all of these ideas, dependency theory, guys, CEPAL, including Raúl Prebisch, and all of these things were basically the support that produce this so-called import substitution industrialization, right? Now, I'm running out of time, but I want to make a last connection with something very important, guys. So, many people in Latin America today, and this is, the reason I'm bringing this up is because what I am about to explain is the origin of this. Many people in Latin America are not very happy with US foreign policy and with the role of multilateral agencies like the World Bank and the IMF, right? And I'm sure many of you have heard about this, maybe know about this, but this is part of the origin that produced that discontent, that produced that antagonistic approach, right, by Latin American people toward these entities, the US government, IMF, World Bank, and at some extent other rich economies. So here is the idea. Let me go back to this very quickly before we stop. Where is my whiteboard? Once again. So remember this bucket, right? So Latin America, the foreign exchange and reserves in Latin America are running low and low and low and low and low. Latin America is fully dependent on the fluctuations on the price of raw materials, copper, oil, gold, rubber, coffee, bananas, right? So when the price of these commodities is going up, Latin American economies enjoy a boom. And all these exports, you know, provide a fantastic source of foreign exchange. The bucket starts filling up. That's awesome. That's awesome. But if the price of these commodities starts falling for different reasons, now all these exports as a source of foreign exchange start diminishing. And you know, in the case of the Great Depression, they totally disappear. But the needs, imports, you know, Latin America had to buy manufactured goods. They need shoes, they need food, they need equipment, TVs, well, now computers, cars, medical equipment, all of these things, but Latin America doesn't have the money to pay for it. So one way, remember, to replenish your foreign exchange is by, remember, two ways: debt or partners. So debt basically means Mexicans borrowing money from the IMF. Mexicans or Bolivians or Guatemalans or Nicaraguans or whatever Latin American people borrowing money from the IMF in order to increase the level of reserves so that they could buy what they need. Or, the other way, inviting more multilateral companies to invest in Latin American countries, because that's another flow that I forgot to mention. Another flow is FDI, foreign direct investment, or in other words, multinational corporations investing in Latin American countries, right? But either way, if you engage in debt, you have to pay the money back. Or if you engage in partnerships with multilateral corporations, transnational corporations, FDI, you lose control, because now your partners own a percentage of your companies. So you don't have full control over the destiny of your industry. The point is that this is the origin that gave basically, well, this is when, let me stop sharing this, and so I can show you what I'm trying to say. This originated in part this antagonic attitude towards the World Trade Organization, WTO, IMF, International Monetary Fund, I guess I just flipped this over, and the World Bank. And later we are going to talk about something called the Washington Consensus that basically built on this argument to, well, basically claim that these organizations that, by the way, are all based in New York, in Washington, D.C., hence the Washington Consensus. So the IMF, the World Bank, they are based in Washington, are in concert. There is an orchestrated effort of exploitation, a new form of exploitation of poor economies, like the ones in Latin America, right? So it's not about, sending ships anymore, like the Spanish or the Portuguese did. No. This is a different type of exploitation based on the financial system that basically, countries around the world are following, right? All right, let me make a stop right here. Questions, comments?
I had a quick question.
Yes, indeed.
I was listening to what you were saying about the World Trade Organization and the federal direct investment. Are Latin America countries, are they more open to the idea of foreign direct investments? Because I know like a lot of the Middle Eastern countries don't like it because they said it affects the sovereignty of their nation. But when it comes to Latin American countries, are they open to it? Do they like that, or do sometimes they get offended too?
Yeah, well, okay, good question. You are so ahead of me. That's great. In a week or so, we are going to discover, Sandeep, that because of the import substitution industrialization fail in Latin America, many of these countries, if not all, saw themselves with huge amounts of debt. Billions and billions of dollars that even today in 2021 have not been able to pay it back to the IMF and the World Bank. But anyway, in the 1980s, the debt problem was so big that in August of 1982, Mexico was the first country that said, you know what, I cannot pay you back, guys, I'm out. Default. Mexico defaulted on its international debt, and then Argentina and Brazil, and this produced this domino effect of huge proportions, a major international financial crisis. And of course, the IMF and the World Bank and the US didn't like this. Like, what are you talking about? You need to give me my money back, right? Or else. Anyway, this was the second wave that increased the resistance and the fear and the discontent against the IMF and the World Bank, because what these guys did was to say, all right, relax, guys. We are going to be able to help you out of this financial hole if you comply with a series of conditions, the IMF and World Bank conditionality. And one of those conditions was to open to international finance once again. So if you want to get assistance, financial assistance, technical assistance, and get inserted back into the international financial flows, well, you need to abandon your nonsense, dependency theory, closed economics, Raul Prebisch, CEPAL type of economics. You cannot do that. Obviously, it doesn't work, right? So one of the conditions was you need to let multilateral corporations to invest in your country. Well, wait a second, but we don't like that. We are against that. Well, that's one of the conditions. And of course, this is one condition. I'm going to give you like 10 different ones in the original list, and that later was expanded, but the original was around 10 conditions. So to answer your question, Sandeep, in the 1980s, Latin American economies had no choice, and they did that, and we are going to talk about that. Today, it's a bit different because some countries are in better position than others. Some countries can have more room for maneuver to reject or to accept foreign direct investment. So we need to take this in this historical context until we arrive to today. So again, hold on, Sandeep. Good question, though. Very good question.
Thank you, Professor.
Any other question or comment, guys? Right. So I'm pretty much out of time, but next time I'm going to start talking about briefly about the politics of the time. I'm talking about how people like Fidel Castro, was running this populist platform in Cuba, or Salvador Allende was doing something similar in Chile. And other populist governments became very powerful because, get this, and this is what I am going to pick up next class, get this. During the import substitution industrialization era, it was clear the need for an entity, an economic entity, strong enough to launch and support such policies. And the only entity capable of doing that was, guess what? The federal government. So this is the time where, governments in Latin America got really, really, really big. I mean, if you think that the US government is big and that they interfere with everything, taxes, regulations, all sorts of, interference with market economics, well, wait. Wait until you see what happened in Latin America, because governments were used as the instrument to implement import substitution industrialization with, we are going to explore this with very interesting consequences for Latin America and also for the rest of the world, but more importantly, for economic development within these Latin American economies. So hang in there, guys. I'm out of time, so I'm going to stop the class here, and I will see you on Wednesday again, okay? Bye, guys. Sorry, kind of a sudden stop. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Bye.